Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, valuable members of the trustees and from the audience. I'm Mike Liu from SPIU. Today, together with my co-presenter, Sean Tolis, and runner of our project of this presentation, Alex Birch, together with 6 additional teammates of mine sitting among you, and guided by Professor Justin Ross, aided by Caitlin Cheek, we'd like to present to you our research and findings on the fire service sustainability in Monroe County, Indiana. This presentation is structured on a spectrum. First, we're going to introduce to you something about background and the supporting findings, recommendations, and finally our recommended ways forward. Finally, we'll entertain and respond to your questions, comments, and concerns. Could you all hear me in this volume? The back of the auditorium. And this presentation, the wording is pretty small at this, but it will be available to you all upon request after the presentation so you can see the whole thing. But later on, when we show the screens, you also see some bigger words in each slide. Now moving on to the first part is some brief introduction of the background. There are 2 components to that. One is the client group, the other is the summary of issues. First is the client group. That our client group, as you may know right now, consists of 4 townships in Monroe County, namely Benton, Bloomington, Salt Creek, and Monroe. And for each part, I would say that we didn't include the city of Bloomington simply because it has its own fire department, and it's not in request of service analysis in this case. As you may see, each township, Benton, Bloomington, Salt Creek, and Monroe. And we'll classify that actually every township involved is very interested in 2 goals in common. One is how to more sustainably sustain fire service in terms of the finance and some alternative revenue resources. But also, they are also interested in terms of how to better the quality of fire service delivery in our county. The summary issues that we find essentially consists of 3 sets of challenges and 3 sets of outcomes, and are what we say prospects. Namely, the challenges consist of demography, geography, and finance. And the 3 sets of prospect or opportunities consist of actually, I would say, is the connection between the firefighters and the people, the dedication and innovation by the firefighters, as well as, I would say, the upcoming I-69. The 3 sets of challenges, namely, the first consists of the dispersed population. As you may know, our county is represented by a wide representation of the people across the dispersed areas. It shows the vitality of our county, but it also poses a challenge in terms of efficient, I would say, response time, fast enough response time to all incidents of fire. And the second factor is in terms of the terrain that we have. Southern Indiana has rolling hills, and it's aggravated by the multiple lakes that we have. Otherwise, it would be a natural wonder, but these lakes also may delay the response time that these firefighters can get to and what they desire to get to. And furthermore, the anticipated challenges from I-69, which may pose a barrier in terms of the east-west travel, and which may also delay the response time involved. But there are also prospects that are optimistic. From our engagement with the fire administrators and firefighters alike, we see the dedication by them in terms of better enhancing the quality of fire service delivery. And we see the connection they have with the people in the township and in the county. We experience that. We are moved by many of those movements. And that's strengthened our view to further our analysis in order to help you in any way that's possible. So, also in terms of, I would say, the fiscal pressure because of the state configuration that our townships also experience varying degrees of financial stress. That's something also we like to tackle in this project. So next part is our supporting fundings, which is due with our analysis, which may inform the recommendations and ways forward we are going to present to you. The supporting findings consist of 6 components, namely the case studies, the fire prevention program, the capital purchases timeline, alternative revenue analysis, also in terms of legal analysis, and finally the service delivery analysis. Now moving on to the first component, the case studies. We look at 3 case studies. The first one is the Indianapolis Unigolf case. As you may know, Unigolf was established in 1970. It's the first city-county consolidation in the US. And although it's not the first in terms of consolidation in the county level, the first is 1805 in New Orleans, Louisiana. But this case, together with Nashville, Tennessee, and Jacksonville, Florida, these 3 serve as the most exemplary case studies in terms of consolidation in the US. We chose this case, Indianapolis, because we think it's most similar in terms of its relation with our context, but also some key lessons that we can draw from. 3 key lessons. First is that more broad-based support can lead to better rate of success. The cross-jurisdictional and cross-sectoral collaboration and support Unigolf enjoys is not only from the management, the non-profits, the private sectors, but also is from the people. I think that if we continue strengthening the efforts that we have, engagement with the people, learning from them, their views, and soliciting advice from them, communicating with them, then I think the rate of success that we can enjoy will probably be even greater. And the second key lesson is the physical equity factor. You see, much of the benefits from Unigolf is enjoyed by not only the county, but even the region. So it's sub-state, but more than a single county. However, some of the taxing burden in terms of the property tax is more by the standard township, just one township. That has been a problem since the late 1980s, and it continues until today. Although there are some measures that have been in place to combat this problem and try to correct for it. But see, if we have visionary planning, then we can prevent the problem from happening in the first place. So if there is any consolidated and/or cooperative measure is to take place in our county, then if we take this into consideration, the prospect probably will be brighter. And the third key lesson is in terms of that the centralized planning is key, is important. It also applies to our case so that the planning can be effective and efficient at the same time, but also we can still allow local flavors to play. That means we can harness the advantages from each township to contribute to these joint efforts. Be it in terms of some townships could contribute more in terms of finance. Some townships can contribute more in terms of human power. Some townships can run specific their programs of expertise, like some fire prevention programs and Project Lifesaver in our county. And these all can contribute in terms of the advantages played by each township that can still be continued as time goes on. Moving on to the second case study is the Brownsburg Fair Territory. That's the first fair territory in the state of Indiana. It took place in 1995. And also 3 key lessons. The first key lesson is the same as the last one, the importance of broad-based support and continued solicitation of that support. And actually it's prevalent throughout all the case studies that we have been conducting. And second key lesson is in terms of the fact that the fair territory actually allowed and helped in implementing an exemplary fire prevention program. It's leading in the state and even beyond the state. Now, some of the main features of that fire prevention program consists of things like the car seat inspection, first aid CPR lessons, senior citizen engagement, education to young people, young children, especially elementary school children, and also Project Lifesaver. These programs have been serving as a great connection point between the citizens and the firefighters in Brownsburg. And third key lesson is that we believe that fire territory also can serve as a stepping stone for further inter-jurisdictional cooperation. So that's between the county and other counties, and even counties beyond the state. It happened in Brownsburg such that the program that Brownsburg implements, like especially Fire Protection Service, it has been running programs across its surroundings, running events with other jurisdictions in things like the Hendricks County Fair, in the Lucas Oil Race events in Indy. All these events, serve not only as a way to, join expertise, learn from one another, but also establish a good name in the neighborhood for Brownsburg. So moving on to the third case study is the White River Fire District. Also 2 key lessons. The first one is run the similar line of extensive support. And the second key lesson is in terms of the importance of extensive upfront planning. Actually, because of the visionary planning, White River has 2 programs of pride. First is in terms of its ambulance service, and second is in terms of its fire inspection service. These 2 programs, especially the ambulance service, generate much revenue for the fire department. And that actually serves as a lesson for us. That is, if we have good visionary planning beforehand, if we were before conducting any consolidated and/or corporate measure, then I think it's going to be very helpful to us. And that concludes our case studies. Moving on to the second part, which is the fire prevention program. The importance of having this part is, I think, to inform one key lesson. That is, fire prevention is at least as important as firefighting itself. The consolidation effort, if we were to take any measure, any effort on that, we provide 2 additional advantages. One is the financial resource that we can get because of a broader because of a broader revenue generation base. But also, the second advantage is in terms of the expertise area that we can generate. So by joining forces, the expertise will also be joined. And that can contribute to the success of that program. And furthermore, fire prevention programs, even better, are supported by our firefighters, our own firefighters. So by talking with fire administrators and firefighters alike, like Matt from Bloomington Township, like Jim from Van Buren Township, and a host of other firefighters too, we realized their dedication, their professionalism in promoting this initiative. They know better than ours, and they know that from the first-hand experience. They know the importance of not only preventing casualty loss and loss of property as well, but also it's beneficial in terms of the potential of helping generate some revenue in terms of the cost savings from the reduction in the number of runs that you need to run. Because if you prevent fire loss in the first place, then probably there will be fewer fires to correct. And also, fire prevention is quintessential in terms of the safety of residents, which I believe is a key concern for you. Also in terms of saving on cost, which we just shared. So, what are some of the prevention initiatives that you can undertake? Some of the townships have been already taking some of these measures. Like the previous one mentioned, like Project Lifesaver, first aid CPR lessons. These are quintessential, important. But also, we think there are some additional ones that are worth considering to further enhance, to make it more systematic and extensive as a result. Things like smoke alarm and fire sprinkler system installation, imparting of such prevention knowledge to young children in elementary school, I think can serve as great measures to implement in this area. And they have been achieving astounding success. Across the U.S., the success rate resulting from these prevention efforts have been great. From Iowa, Minnesota to Idaho, from Colorado to Georgia, these have been successful. I just want to give you 2 examples. In the first example, both of these examples happen in Minnesota. In the first example, in Minnesota, just by the implementation of the first of these 2 programs, that city actually reduced its casualty in terms of the number of lives lost due to fire from 69 a year to 0. From 69 to 0. In the implementation of these two programs, they essentially serve as wonder workers. Now, in another example also happening in Minnesota, it's in the Spring Lake Park, Blaine, Moundsville Fire Department. It's a department that serves 3 areas. Let's just abbreviate it as SBM Fire Department. By implementing these fire preventive efforts, essentially they, after their good base, they achieved 2 statuses. First, they became the lowest in terms of the cost per run in the country. And another one is they became tied for the lowest in terms of the number of lives lost just by implementing more of these fire preventive efforts. So we urge you to think about that. That is, if that you were to consider any fire consolidated and / or cooperative measure, then harness the sales when the wind is high and make this a priority. Moving on to the third component, the third part, which is the capital purchases timeline. This is a living document for you to document the things that you purchase, be it in terms of fire apparatuses, equipment, and other specific components. When you record that, two benefits you can derive from that. One is you can have a greater bookkeeping capacity for you to know for sure what are the things you purchase, what are the things you like to purchase in future, and what are the things you can collaborate with one another. Because the second advantage that directly derives from the first one is some joint purchasing agreement that you can derive. Regardless whether you are to consolidate or not, you can always consider in terms of interjurisdictional cooperation, at least joint purchasing, so that you can achieve discounts and save great money. And three key components on that living document, namely the apparatus, the equipment of apparatus, and the supplier. Now we'd like to show you a specific example. As you may see, here's the first page on the apparatus. It has key components like purchasing year, lifespan, whether it's the primary or it's more like a backup equipment, first in or not, the estimated replacement year and township, location, and so on. You see, the things that we highlight to you are things that you can consider is in terms of, now these highlighted items are things for you to see that they are more or less similar in terms of the type of apparatus. So, and these are the apparatuses that probably will experience similar expiration year. Think of that. If you can consolidate efforts like that, you can think of measures that you can buy in bulk across townships at once. Then, what you can achieve is some great cost savings. By contacting Eric Adams from Ferrara.com, we learned that by actually engaging in this, by buying fire engine, for instance, you can, if you buy 3 or more, you can save $6,000 each. So that means if you get 4 of those, you save essentially $25,000. These joint purchasing can happen across an apparatus and to the equipment apparatus. And the third one is on the sources as well. Now these equipment can consist of things like radios, sirens, emergency lightings, and in terms of other equipment as well, like even daily items like fridges, beds, computers as well. We think furthermore that you can also inspire one another. Like if you find a good source that says, I now know a better supplier that can save you great money, and the contact is also smooth, then you can share expertise with one another. And that sharing of expertise can also serve as an additional benefit resulting from this capital purchase type. And with that concluded, we'd like to present to you the fourth component, the alternative revenue analysis. The purpose of having that is to show you that besides the taxation you can generate from the citizens, there's another part you can also generate revenue. These are the alternative revenues. You don't have to tax the people, but you can still get enough revenues so as for you to sustain the fire service delivery, but also gaining better rapport with the people. So we look at two specific sets of these alternative revenues. The first set is the grants. Now grants, as you may all know, what we think is of specific notice is that if you collaborate and join forces in applying for these grants, you can not only achieve grants that are of a higher value, but also it can help you, combining expertise, so it can further enhance the quality of the grants that you apply for. Now, specific grants that are worth mentioning are FEMA grants and other grants that's more state and regional in terms of, in Indiana's case. FEMA grants including assistance to firefighters grants and staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grants or safer grants, as well as the fire prevention and safety grants. The first two kinds relates more to the fire protection service, and third type relates more in terms of the fire prevention type. And the second and third type actually were classified under the first type, which is grant type in of itself. And there are also other grants. So like the Department of Natural Resources grants and the burn care and prevention grants, which are more specific to our case. And moving on to the second set, which are specialties, what we would say, including things like the inspection fees, which currently what we recommend to you is that some of us has been implementing the inspection to the home. And what this is about is that the inspection is whenever a new building is established, be it in terms of residential or business, an inspection got to take place in order for the firefighters to ascertain that it's up to the standard in terms of the fire code. So it's safe for people to live in or conduct any business or any activity in. Now, the inspection fees is a feature which we think can help because currently, the things that we inspect don't generate revenues for us because, frankly, we inspect that, but it's not a system for the townships to generate revenue. And so by actually implementing this service as a formal structure, you can actually generate some revenue. The amount may not be great, but still you can use that amount to service the other fire prevention efforts. And furthermore, the upcoming I-69, another possibility is that it can create some business and economic development opportunities. So by having more business coming in, our residential homes coming in, you can inspect more buildings, which essentially can help you generate more revenue. And also the second part is the vehicle and apparatus maintenance training for firefighters. We think that currently, if you were to implement that, essentially train a few of your staff for that, you will ensure one thing, that is, you can make sure that in future, although we incur initial costs, but in future we can bring this service in-house so that your technicians can actually service these requests. And what that means is some cost savings, but also a sense of pride by your own people that you can do that and do it this color. And furthermore, that you can also charge a revenue fee, a service fee, by actually having these technicians go to other jurisdictions and inspect their other departments, apparatus, and vehicle maintenance requests. And also the third component, by the way, this actually has generated about $45,000 for White River Township Fire Department. So it's a significant amount of cost savings from that. And the third component being the ambulance service. This is also an example we learned actually from White River, which is essentially by the current situation in our case in Monroe County is that the EMS service is only operated by IU Health. And you may imagine the burden actually taken by them. But if you were to have any measure that relates to fire department run EMS service, then what you can achieve is that you can not only help people in terms of further prevention of life loss or further injury, but what you can also achieve is that by actually charging the insurance company a certain fee resulting from the ambulance service before you send them to hospital, you can generate much revenue from having that program. As a matter of fact, White River generated about $500,000 a year. $500,000 a year just from that service itself. So we think that these are the programs that definitely are worth for you to consider and implement. And now I'd like to pass the time to Sean Tolis to tell you more about the other two parts of the analysis, recommendations, and ways forward.
Thank you, Mike. So I can start off talking about the legal analysis section, everyone's favorite section. It gets better though, because the legal analysis section is also the tax analysis section, so everyone's two favorite subjects right under the same heading. But we'll get through it. So the first, tax controls is basically what we're talking about under the legal analysis section. As fun as this section is, it is important to understand the legal architecture and kind of the limitations that the townships have to operate in. So the first kind of tax control that is important for the townships are the levy limits. The levy limits basically tie the size of the levies year to year to growth of income in the state. So income goes up, levies can go up, income goes down, levies go down. The two kind of important things to note about how the levies work is that They're tied to statewide average income, but that doesn't account for any local variations in income. So if income in a particular area changes in a different way than the statewide average income, that's not accounted for. The other thing to note is that there's kind of a delayed effect that the change in income has on the levy limit. So if the economy goes bad, that's going to have a delayed effect on how soon that hits the levy. But then once the economy recovers, the levies take a long time to recover from after the economy turns around. Then the next kind of layer of tax controls are what's called the maximum aggregate rate cap. We abbreviate that as MARC because it's much easier to say. This is not something that is actually causing any tax losses at the moment. Basically, this is a cap that's on all of the taxes that are imposed on any particular property, all of the taxing jurisdictions that are trying to tax a particular property. If a rate goes above a certain level, then they can't collect any of that overage. And the amount of that overage is a tax loss, and that tax loss has to be distributed amongst all the jurisdictions that are trying to collect any rates above that limit. So right now, this isn't producing any tax losses, but if any taxes were to be raised up to the point where you hit that cap, then that produces tax losses for any jurisdictions that are part of that kind of aggregate rate. And then the third level of tax controls are the constitutional circuit breakers. These are the 1, 2, 3 property tax caps that many of you may be familiar with. These are producing tax losses right now for the townships. Their impact on the fire levy is a real impact right now. Currently in these townships, it's not an overwhelming impact, but it is real, it's there. And again, the thing to note with both of these limits here is that any taxes that are going to be raised into those caps any further are going to affect the proportional tax losses, not only for the jurisdiction that might be raising those taxes into those limits, but also for any other taxing jurisdictions that are part of any of those aggregate rates. So that's the legal analysis section there, things to keep in mind. And then the final kind of analysis section is the service delivery analysis. For this, we collected a whole bunch of run data from all the fire departments, and we analyzed the run data. For the kind of scale and scope of the project that we were doing, we focused in particular on the slowest 5% of run times. We wanted to see kind of if there were any geographical patterns for where the slowest run times occurred. And because we were looking to kind of see things that have to do with consolidation, we were especially looking for patterns to see if there was a really conspicuous grouping of slow run times that centered really closely along the borders between the townships. And the reason we're looking for that is because the idea is if you were to consolidate all these townships under one service area, then the borders that kind of separate the townships would become less important because it would be treated kind of one big service area. And so if we see a really conspicuous grouping of slow response times along those borders, then we think that part of the reason for that is because it's a jurisdictional issue as far as which fire department is responding. And so if those boundaries become less significant as far as who's taking the call and who's responding, then we think that might help lessen some of those long response times that are clustered really tight around those borders. So if we take a look at the map here, these are the findings that we did after analyzing those data. A couple notes about how to interpret this map here. The points that are on the map are only the slow response times. So two things to note here is first of all, as the points get more red and less green, the response times are getting slower, but it's also, you're looking for the density of points on the map that are going to tell you that there are a lot of slow response times in those areas. So it's kind of two things that are telling you that there's a lot of slow response times in the area, and that's kind of relative. Again, it's the bottom 5% response times that are showing up on this map. So we're looking for the density of the points and also the relative kind of colors of the points. And so if we look for that pattern that I'm talking about, that clustering along the borders between the townships, we do see that going on here. This is kind of a conspicuous clustering on this border here. It's not obviously it's not on all the borders, but there is a clustering here and clustering here. Obviously, not all of that is going to be attributable to consolidation. Not all of that is something that consolidation is going to fix, because part of this is just the fire departments tend to be kind of centrally located within the townships, and so those areas are just farther away from fire departments. You're never going to have uniform response times to all these areas. But we think that because there are some of these conspicuous kind of clusterings on some of these borders, especially in situations where it might be a situation where it doesn't look like it's related to how far away they are from a fire department, we think that a consolidation might be able to help some of those issues. It's also important to note that for something like this, a pattern that is it's not something that is related necessarily to consolidation, but it's just probably something geographical. This map is just a snapshot of a dynamic GIS tool that we started, again, focusing on just the slow response times for our purposes here. But it's a tool that we're giving to the trustees and hoping that they can expand on as they can. expanding it to more data points and trying to incorporate as much data as possible, because it's a tool that can be used to kind of make strategic decisions about how to go about addressing patterns like this, or patterns that have to do with like the incoming kind of challenges or opportunities that I-69 is going to present. We mentioned that I-69 is going to be a barrier to east-west travel. It's also going to be kind of a conduit to north-south travel, so it's going to be challenges, but it's also going to be opportunities. Something like this tool, this GIS tool that kind of supports the snapshot that is the map here, can help to model what some of the impacts of that conduit north-south might be, to try to take advantage of some of those opportunities that might be there to try to take full advantage of that. So that's our service delivery analysis. Now we're kind of moving into the brass tacks part of everything. So that's everything we did. That's all great. But the point of everything that we did was to try to inform our recommendations. And basically the way we thought through our recommendations here was we tried to kind of start with the world as big as possible, all the theoretical possibilities that the townships could go through to try to address fiscal sustainability issues, whittle that down to things that were actually realistic and possible, and then out of the things that are actually possible, kind of try to order those into things that we think are, sort of seem to be in the best interest of the townships, and then things that are a little bit less advisable. And so that's kind of how we have them here. And we have them broken down basically into two rough kinds of categories and kinds of recommendations. So there's things that are more structural recommendations, and these things are going to be kind of mutually exclusive. So I don't know if you can see small here, but there's fire territory and fire district. Those are mutually exclusive options. You can't do fire territory and fire district. And those are our more structural kinds of recommendations. So we have kind of a discussion here that I'll get into in a second about the advantages and disadvantages of one or the other, and we kind of lean one way on that. But then there's also recommendations that are kind of independent recommendations that are not mutually exclusive, that you can do with the fire territory, with the fire district, without either of those options. And so we have recommendations that we think the township should pursue, regardless of whatever consolidation plan that they go after or don't go after, because they're lower cost options. They're also kind of smaller wins, but they're lower cost options, and they're just kind of generally good ideas. So our main recommendation that came out of this, kind of the big picture, the bottom line that we think is in the best interests of the townships as far as fiscal sustainability goes, is that we think a fire territory is going to be kind of the best solution to address these kind of long-term fiscal sustainability issues. So before we kind of discuss why we think that, we'll talk a little bit about what a fire territory actually is. So the way that you form a fire territory, all the townships would pass identical resolutions. That's how you form a fire territory. As long as you go through the right process, and as long as the resolutions look the way that the statutes say they have to look, you have a fire territory. This is something that can be done entirely at the election of the townships. This is not something that the county has to approve of. This is not something that the Department of Local Government Finance has to approve of. It's something that the townships get to decide on their own. If you're going to do a fire territory, one provider unit must be designated. So one of the townships has to be designated as the provider unit that is responsible for providing fire service for the entire territory. That being said, the governance structure under a fire territory is flexible. So who actually provides the service within a fire territory can be done through contract or through governing documents. So one township is going to be primarily responsible for securing service. That doesn't necessarily mean that fire department is literally going to be sending trucks to the entire fire territory. They can do a lot of things in terms of the governance structure. We determined the boundaries within the fire territory should be coterminous with the boundaries that currently exist for the townships. They don't have to be coterminous, but we couldn't find a reason why they shouldn't be coterminous. There just didn't seem to be any reason why they shouldn't just be the boundaries of the townships, and it adds a layer of administrative complexity if you don't make them coterminous, so we just said that they should be. And then we have a recommended levy structure. This is something that we detail in the report. It's something it's very detailed, but just know that that's out there, and we have a recommendation on that. So kind of the discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of a fire territory in general. The advantages, the potential for cost savings is high because you're consolidating and streamlining fire service delivery, so you're going to have cost savings there. Financial and administrative flexibility is high. This is a very flexible option. Fire territory has a lot of flexibility that none of these other options have. Political feasibility is higher than a fire district. That's because the townships can do a fire territory completely on their own. That's not true of a fire district. Some of the disadvantages, administrative simplicity is low. It can be somewhat complex to operate a fire territory. That's because the townships have all this discretion. That means they have to be able to weed through all that discretion, and that can lead to some complexity. Some of that can be mitigated by weeding through all that complexity once at formation and setting up the formative documents so that you only have to deal with all those issues once up front. Also, the stability can be low within a fire territory. So one of the issues with the fire territory is all the townships can elect to withdraw from a fire territory once a year, every year. So the stability that is inherent within a fire territory is the amount of stability that exists in the cooperation between the townships. If the townships continue to cooperate year to year, then it will be stable and enduring. If they decide not to cooperate year to year, then the stability within the fire territory will be low. So because we have kind of a lot of flexibility within a fire territory, there are a lot of different governance models that are possible. So to kind of wrap our heads around and help you guys wrap your heads around what some of those possibilities might look like, we outlined 2 models. These models kind of sit at the 2 ends of the spectrum in terms of the degree of centralization that would be in these 2 models. There's a lot of different possibilities that lie in between these models, so these aren't the only 2 possibilities. These are just 2 possibilities that we outlined. So the first one that we outlined is what we call the cooperative model. This would be a more decentralized version of a fire territory. In this model, we would have non-uniform tax rates, and they would actually just match the current tax rates. This is the non-uniform tax rates is something that is possible in a fire territory. It's something that is not possible in a fire district. In this model, service provision would stay the same, and it would be through contract. So the current fire departments would have the same responsibilities as they currently do in terms of what territory they have responsibility for. So essentially, governance and funding would look different on paper. The money would flow to different places at different times, but by the time you get to the end of it, functionally, everything would more or less be the same as it is right now under this model. All current capital assets would stay with their current owners. There wouldn't be any reallocation of current capital assets. The big difference from kind of how things are now versus how things would look under this model is that there would be a new capital asset levy that would be operated by the fire territory, and the money that would be from that levy would be used to purchase new joint assets, and those new joint capital assets would then be jointly administered by the central kind of fire territory authorities, and they would be made, the joint decisions would be made about kind of where to put those joint assets to kind of best serve the collective interests of the entire fire territory. So some relative strengths of this model as compared to the model that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Political feasibility kind of generally higher with this model because it's a smaller change from where things are right now. It would be just kind of a little bit easier to get to this point. And administrative flexibility is higher in this model, again, because it's more decentralized. The administration of it stays pretty loose and flexible. So that's one model that's possible under a fire territory. The second model that we outlined is a consolidative model. So this would either have uniform tax rates, which would be the scheme that would have to come into play for a fire district. If we were to have uniform tax rates under this model, we would recommend that to make that equitable, to make the tax scheme equitable under that we would recommend a real commitment to improving service in the south. Make sure I get my directions right because I messed this up earlier today. The southeast corner of the territory, the Salt Creek and kind of Lower Benton area, because we saw there was some slow service times there. So we would want to make sure that what the taxpayers were paying for with uniform tax rates aligns with the actual quality of service that they're actually getting with uniform rates. There's also a possibility that you would continue to have non-uniform rates under this model. If you were to have non-uniform rates under this model, we would recommend that the rates be indexed to some kind of objective measure of quality of service, run times or something like that, and that would be updated on some kind of routine basis so that the rates would reset on some kind of regular basis, again, so that what taxpayers are actually paying for matches up with kind of the quality of service that they're actually getting. In this model, governance and funding would be centralized, so the operation of the fire territory, the authorities that are operating the fire territory, which would be the township authorities, but they would be operating kind of as a collective unit to govern the fire territory. That would be centralized, so they would make central decisions for that. All of the current capital assets that are separately owned by the townships right now would be transferred into the ownership of the fire territory, and so the fire territory itself as a separate entity would own all those capital assets. Then those capital assets would be reallocated and redistributed to the stations where they would best serve kind of the collective purposes. The fire departments, the separate fire departments would continue to exist. They would continue to operate their personnel. But essentially the administrative kind of tops of those fire departments would be condensed into an administrative core, and that administrative core would make decisions about kind of budgets and service areas and of each of these separate fire departments. And so it would be a very kind of centralized, consolidated, much more kind of streamlined version of a fire territory. So some of the relative strengths of this model, this would minimize the risk of instability under a fire territory. The risk of instability is one of the kind of major drawbacks of a fire territory. This would minimize that risk because even though technically everyone could still get out every year, under this model there would be some substantial cost to doing that because everyone is so closely knit together. And so this would minimize the risk of that. It would also maximize the cost savings potential, again, because everything is more streamlined and more integrated, the cost savings potential is maximized here. It also maximizes the potential for improved service delivery, kind of going back to the map. The less significant those boundaries between the townships become, the more we think the potential for improved service delivery goes up. So that's how we conceive of the different models that are possible, or at least the two ends of the spectrum that are possible under fire territories. There's also a fire district that's a possibility, and we'll talk through what that is here. So fire district, as far as what it is and how it differs from a fire territory, as opposed to a fire territory, a fire district is a completely separate entity that divorces townships completely from the provision of fire services. So when a fire district is formed, townships are no longer in the business of providing fire services in that area. A fire district can only be created by the county. This is not something that the townships can elect to do on their own. It's not like the fire territory where they can pass a resolution and it's done. So they have to basically convince the county to do this. It's operated by a board of trustees, a separate board of trustees. It's not operated by the township trustees kind of acting collectively like a fire territory would be. Each township is supposed to have a representative trustee on the board, but the county officials appoint those trustees. And the DLGF approves the initial fire district levy and eliminates all township levies and funds that are related to fire services. So it is a complete kind of transfer of power as far as everything that related to fire services in the townships is no longer under the umbrella of the townships. Everything is now in the fire district. So some of the advantages and disadvantages of this model. Administrative simplicity and stability are high. It's simple to operate this model because it is a complete transfer. Everything comes out of one box and it moves completely into the other box. That's fairly simple to administer. Its stability is high. It's not like a fire territory where you can choose piecemeal to withdraw every year afterwards. Once it's done, it's relatively harder to undo. The potential for cost savings and improved service delivery are high. Again, the more centralized you're going to get, the more streamlined you're going to get, the more that potential is going to go up, and this is a highly streamlined, centralized option. Some of the disadvantages, political feasibility and flexibility are low. Because this is not something that the townships can just elect to do on their own, it's going to be a harder kind of process to go through. And flexibility is low because everything about a fire district is highly prescribed in statutes. There is a much more prescriptive method you have to go through to form it. And what a fire district can actually look like at the end, the statutes are much more prescriptive about that versus a fire territory, the statutes are very permissive about that. It also, and same thing, so it does not provide as much financial flexibility or revenue generation potential, again, because the statutes are much more prescriptive when it comes to fire territories. So those are kind of our structural recommendations. Again, those two options are mutually exclusive. You can't do both, not that you want to. These next two kind of sets of recommendations are things that can be done on top of those, separate from those. These are the non-mutually exclusive options. So one being joint purchasing, and this goes back to that spreadsheet that you saw. The spreadsheet is intended to help make joint purchasing easier. So for joint purchasing, townships can purchase with each other, from each other, on behalf of each other, and there's some generous laws, basically some state statutes that are set up that when they want to do these kinds of things, they can use abbreviated contract forms to do that. The states tried to make it easy for townships to cooperate with each other in this way, and there's some bulk discounts maybe to be realized in doing this. So some of the advantages of joint purchasing, if you want to go to the next one, are it's relatively non-controversial. It's relatively cheap. There's not a lot of cost to deciding to just go ahead and purchase things together. The costs are essentially the cost of communication and coordination, and that is the cost. Is that communication and coordination is not that hard, but it doesn't happen on its own. It's not free, and it is an ongoing effort that has to be there. And so hopefully resources like the capital purchases timeline can help in that ongoing effort. The kind of weakness of joint purchasing is that by itself, joint purchasing is not a sufficient enough measure to address kind of the long-term financial sustainability issues. It can be part of the solution, but it's not going to be the entire solution by itself. And then so we have some more independent recommendations. So harkening back to some of the alternative revenue recommendations that Mike went through, we recommend that the townships look into all of those and do as many of those as they want to, as aligned with kind of their priorities, whether that's being more aggressive about going after grants, whether that's looking into the ambulance option, looking into inspection fees, as many of those things as align with their priorities and their needs. But when they do that, we recommend that process be part of the same process of a decision making about the consolidation effort, because those two decisions need to be complementary with each other. We wouldn't want one township to make one set of decisions about alternative revenue sources and another township to make a separate set of decisions, and then those become harder to reconcile after the fact, and those make the decision about consolidation harder than it needs to be down the road. So we would want those kinds of considerations to be made in light of each other. And then we also have a set of specific recommendations for Salt Creek, because Salt Creek has some particular challenges that have to do with its geography and its service relationship with the city of Bloomington at the moment. So we emphasize that we think Salt Creek's interests are best served by continuing to be part of whatever joint effort might come to pass under a fire territory or a fire district. But if that joint effort were not to come to pass, or Salt Creek were not to be part of it, we have some recommendations here that basically have to do with strengthening the contract between Salt Creek and City of Bloomington to address some of the issues that are currently with that contract, and those are in more detail in the report. And now we have some next steps. We're almost there. So these are some specific next steps that kind of keep an eye on the implementation for pursuing the fire territory option, because that's our main recommendation. We wanted to kind of give some details on what the next steps for implementation would look like if the townships were to decide to head down that road. For a fire territory, the resolutions have to be passed between January 1st and April 1st of any year. Just have to hit that window. That's an administrative rule. There's also some formal requirements for what the resolution has to look like. Those are in more detail in the report, but some things to be aware of there. There's also an 18-month kind of levy turnover gap. This is detailed again more in the report. The important thing here is to be aware that it does exist. It is an administrative thing that needs to be worked out, but that it can be worked out. It's basically a gap that exists because of the way that disbursements happen when you change from one set of levies to a new set of levies, and the delay in how that new set of levies disperses to the townships. But that gap can be covered by using interfund transfers, basically, and there are ways to do that that are outlined in more detail in the report. So that gap exists, but it is something that can be handled. And then some more kind of general things to talk about for next steps. We recommend to maintain the Google Doc. That's that spreadsheet that we showed. Continue the GIS mapping effort. We think that will continue to have value down the road. Decide on what alternative revenue sources best align with the township's priorities. Decide on what consolidation strategies best serve the township interests. And then sort of part of that, decide on the degree of centralization that is going to be desired in the townships, which is kind of part and parcel of that same question on what kind of consolidation strategy the townships want to pursue. And I believe we are 2 questions. So that's it.
If you guys have any questions, you're welcome to write them down on a piece of paper, and we'll put them in the bucket, I'll pass it around, and then we'll draw from them. And this is a great opportunity to ask all the folks that put in all the hard work to do all of this.
Can you tell me what determines slow response time? How you figured that?